All right. To continue with the exposé Laurier, or like I want to call it, the Laurier soiree, we're going to diverge from the Lindsay Shepherd incident, and then we're going to go over to this recently posted Stop the Support of Anti-Choice Groups within the WLU Students' Union petition that basically asks the Wilfrid Laurier Student Union to stop supporting this pro-life student group. And then here's the text of this petition. Laurier Lifelink is a pro-life group that is currently funded by the Wilfrid Laurier University Students' Union. Lifelink hosts demonstrations on Laurier's Waterloo campus that have included visual pro-life / anti-choice messaging and harassment of students. By doing so, this group has knowingly created conditions that endanger the emotional and mental safety of students affected by anti-choice rhetoric. These demonstrations create an environment where women and people with uteruses are made to feel unsafe, and individuals who have had abortions are exposed to harm. This petition is a response to Lifelink's recent demonstration and a call for greater accountability from the Wilfrid Laurier University Students' Union. We ask that the Students' Union, 1, adopt a motion that instates a public pro-choice stance on issues of reproductive justice within the Students' Union policy. 2, suspend the funding that Laurier Lifelink receives through the Students' Union clubs and associations. 3, prohibit anti-choice events approved by the Students' Union from taking place in public locations on campus, giving people the choice to engage in these discussions. 4, implement a strike policy within the student union's clubs and associations policies that will ensure accountability after instances of harm. Bolded. In signing this petition, I call upon the Students' Union to accept these demands in order to address the harm that Lifelink causes and foster a culture that upholds reproductive rights. If you would like to read more background information for why these demands are necessary, it is provided here, and I'll get to that link in the moment, which is the meat of this matter. We encourage you to connect with the following resources if engaging in this discussion has been harmful to you, most notably the Diversity Equity Office. Now, I'm doing this one to set up an episode, at least one episode, on the Diversity Equity Office, which seems to be the central hub from which all of this particularly anti-free speech behavior is emanating from. But for the time being, we are going to get into this detailed report on why the pro-choice group wants the pro-life group shut out of the student union. Laurier Lifelink is a pro-life group that is currently supported by the Wilfrid Laurier University Student Union, WLUSU. This group has demonstrated twice on campus in the last year, once through placing small flags in a prominent and central area of campus with no warning to students about the demonstration. This pro-life group put a bunch of flags, one flag representing 10 abortions in Canada that year. And so they just covered this entire quad area with representative death tolls. And there's some articles on that which are pretty telling in the Wilfrid Laurier student newspaper, which I have to say has a better grammar checking editor than does the Evergreen College student newspaper. No offense, Evergreen student college newspaper, but your grammar sucks. Anyways, so the Cord published an article about this demonstration, and then they talked to a bunch of people who were upset about it. And it seems like everybody who was upset about the demonstration was upset on behalf of somebody else. For example, "I came down here and started pulling the flags out and spat on their banner," said Quinta. "I can't imagine what it's like for women, or even more so women who have had a personal experience with abortion, so I'm just frankly kind of pissed." Now, in Canada, pissed means drunk, and also in Canada, the drinking age is lower than it is in America. Not to say that he wasn't pissed off in the American sense, but I just know for a fact that pissed also means drunk in Canada. Quinta continues, "The officers are here telling me you have to respect their rights, and I'm like, but I don't. I don't have to respect their opinion. I don't because, frankly, it is harmful. It's getting political, and this is infringing on my views and rights, too, for so many of my female friends, and it's just so upsetting, so I'm coming down, not as a savior or anything, but as an ally, and as a human who's simply acknowledging women's rights." Dylan Miller had this to say, "It's shaming, it's just invasive, and it's a shame tactic, and I don't think that it's appropriate. It's aggressive, and I think that there's a larger issue to be discussed rather than just saying that abortions are wrong and we need to preserve life. I think it's pretty clear with the pink and blue flags, like what it is and what they're representing. I think it's pretty pathetic," said Miller. "How is this allowed? Isn't this 2016? That happened back in 2016, so I don't understand why the petition said that 2 events happened this year. But whatever. Chronology is not a strong point for the postmodern contingent. To continue with this letter, prior to the anti-choice demonstration that took place on October 24th and 25th, the Students' Union met with representatives from the Diversity and Equity Office and Laurier Lifelink in order to reduce the harm that the event would cause. They met twice, and during these meetings, suggestions were made as to how to make their events less harmful to individuals in the student body. Bolded. While Laurier Lifelink did not take most of the recommendations provided, they did end up agreeing to 7 points. Laurier Lifelink agreed to 1. Wash the chalk off the sidewalk at 4 p.m., since campus services are not provided after this time. 2. Not chalk certain especially harmful statements. 3. Only chalk on certain segments of the sidewalk to allow for an easy and accessible alternate route to avoid the display. 4. Have signs indicating pro-life display was ahead. 5. Have the Students' Union send out an email in advance of the event so that students can avoid or engage with it easier. 6. Have a resource support list on hand for people that approach them. 7. Wait for people to approach them. All right. So those are the 7 rules of engagement that the pro-life group was given in order to have their demonstration. Of these 7 things, one was on the onus of Students' Union, number 5, which is have the Student Union send out an email. And the rest were things that Laurier Lifelink needed to do. Bolded. Of these 7 agreements that were meant to reduce the harm caused by the event, all except 2 of them were violated. Agreements 2 and 6 were unable to be verified as the list of agreed-upon statements has not been released, and none of the writers of this petition approached Laurier Lifelink during the event. Now, I find it especially interesting that none of these people who are writing this petition, they're admitting to actually not having contact with this event in and of itself. The final 5 agreements were all broken, and then they break down these 5 broken agreements. 1. On Wednesday, no one from Laurier Lifelink was available to wash off the chalk from the display as they previously agreed to do, and so someone from the Students' Union had to go wash the chalk off instead. That does seem a little rude. Students were informed that the display would be located in front of the main entrance to Lazardus Hall and the main entrance to the university. Instead, displays extended down the length of both sides of the street. Students who had planned their route around where we were told the display would be were then caught in the middle of it instead. For example, students walking down University from Albert to the doors near the Fred Nichols building would not have been exposed to the display display if they were located where they said they would be. This is a lot of abstract spatial reasoning. I apologize for that. If you're experiencing harm from this, I will, in the link in the description, give you the email address of the Diversity and Equity Office, and they can soothe your strained neurons. However, to continue, by extending the area of their display, Laurier LifeLink took away students' autonomy in deciding to be exposed to their event. In addition, their choice of location for the display was already violating the agreement to allow for an easy and accessible alternate route. The locations that the students' union announced the displays would be happening were at both of the lights on the north side of campus. In order to avoid the display, students would have to walk either all the way up to Albert or down to King to cross, something that is not accessible to everyone within the short time between classes. It's almost like this is an ideological minefield that will just explode in your brain and your heart, all this pain, and there's no way to avoid it. If only it were easy to look away from the sidewalk while you're walking. Or maybe your friends you could have a tough friend lead you, and you could close your eyes or look at birds while you're walking across this display to not be harmed by the words drawn in chalk of various colors upon the ground that you need to traverse in order to get to your next class. One can dream. Number 4, Laurier LifeLink violated their agreement to have signs up indicating the display was ahead in 2 ways. First, on the first day in the morning, there were no signs up. Thus, students with early morning classes did not benefit from being forewarned about the display. Second, on the second day, this is almost like the Bible. On the second day, while there were signs put up, Laurier LifeLink clearly disrespected the reason for having the signs by starting their chalk at the exact spot that the sign was located. By starting their display at the exact spot where students were supposed to be made aware of the display ahead, they nullified the good that the signs were meant to do. Students are unable to take alternate routes or ready themselves for the messages when they see the sign if they are also already seeing the message at that point. In summa, let's do the too long didn't watch right here and right now. The supposition of this whole group is that words are harmful and ideas are harmful, and we need to be protected by ideas, by other ideas. So there's these ideas that police the ideas that need to be policed, right? And then there's this kind of subtle undercurrent of there are ideas that are criminal. There are ideas that will actually harm you, that will violate your autonomy, will violate your sensitive bubble of needing to be healed from all the trauma that you experienced. And then there's the ideas that do all that protecting, right? And what does that do? Why is that problematic? I do understand that somebody who has had trauma in their life needs to work through that trauma, needs to be respected in that trauma. However, we know from psychology, in order to get through trauma, you expose yourself to it and see that this thing that you're scared of is not hurting you. And so this movement wants to make the people who have experienced trauma unable to grow past their trauma by shielding them from that which they need to overcome. In effect, they are disempowering those that they want to empower. And they've dropped the rhetoric of empowerment now, and it's all about safety. So I guess they are being consistent with that. They don't want to empower you anymore. They want to infantilize you. To cut my TDLR short, I believe that this document shows that the climate of desiring thought police in the campus is not just with the administration and not just with the faculty, but is also with the students as well. So they want signs. The signs weren't placed where they want the signs to be placed, and then the chalk was placed where they didn't want the chalk to be placed, and it was never cleaned up. And then number 5, this is the one agreement which the students' union was responsible for, sending an email, and they were negligent in this responsibility. First, the post that they made on their website and social media went live at 4:30 the night before, only 16 hours before the event occurred, which is not enough for those with early morning classes. Even worse than the notice given on the student union page is the timing of the actual email sent out to the student body. Students did not receive this email until 9:30 a.m. on October 24th, an hour after the event had already started. We understand that the most likely reason for this is due to the final meeting with all parties occurred earlier that day on the 23rd. However, bad planning and coordination should not result in the students paying the price. In the future, the Students' Union should ensure that students are provided with sufficient warning, even if it means delaying the event. 7. Instead of waiting for people to approach them, Laurier LifeLink members actively approached people in the area, including counter-protesters and people just trying to get to class. They approached counter-protesters multiple times and did not leave them alone, despite being told that the counter-protesters were not interested in a discussion at that time. Why protest something if you want the other party to leave you alone? Isn't the whole idea of counter-protesting to engage with the protest, right? Like you're by definition, to counter a protest means to engage with the protest. So they just leave us alone, leave us alone. We're protesting your protest. Go away. Go away. Moreover, one of the LifeLink's members chose to yell and name-call one of the counter-protesters on October 25th. I wonder what that was about. Additionally, while this is not one of their stated agreements, Laurier LifeLink members stayed at the display for longer than students were informed they would. We were informed they would be leaving at 10 a.m., but they stayed past this time both days. Thus, students who wanted to avoid being approached by these people were given incorrect information, which may have led them to being placed in a more harmful situation. Laurier LifeLink failed to uphold almost all of their agreements to the student union, rendering the harm reduction approach invalid. These points go to show the general disrespect and lack of concern for their actions, which have come to be expected from Laurier LifeLink. While these points may not have been formally required of the group, their agreement and subsequent breach of these agreements shows that Laurier LifeLink is not concerned with the harm that their display caused and is not committed to reducing this harm. As such, we have no faith that they will be committed to a harm reduction approach in the future. Groups such as these should be held accountable for the harm they cause. Jeez, they are harming the word harm by repeating harm too much. However, the student union should provide clear requirements for clubs when they have a reasonable belief that the students' club's events will cause significant harm and have clear sanctions outlined for violations of these requirements. One requirement which would greatly reduce the harm caused by these groups is to ensure that their events remain private, i.e. in a closed classroom. That's interesting. So they do really want to suppress the speech of the pro-life group. Just baldly. They want you to go away into a closed room to do your thing. Because harm. By keeping the events in a closed space, students can then choose if they are going to attend, making most other harm reduction methods unnecessary. All undergraduate students are members who pay fees to the Wilfrid Laurier University Student Union. They keep on going. Wow, they keep on going with this. All right, I'm going to skip this paragraph. You might be thinking, quote, I may not like that this group exists on campus, but they have a right to exist, end quote. Or, quote, they have freedom of speech, end quote. Groups like LifeLink technically have a right to exist, and we are not denying their ability to exist or speak on campus. Rather, this petition argues that these groups should not be entitled to student funding through the student union, and that anti-choice sentiment should not be allowed in approved public demonstrations on campus. Wait, so technically you have the right to exist, and we're not denying your ability to exist or speak on campus, but we're arguing that you should not be allowed to speak in public on campus. These requests do not infringe upon LifeLink's right to freedom of speech, but instead try to create a safer and more accountable context in which their speech can occur. No, it does. These requirements do infringe on LifeLink's right to freedom of speech by trying to create a safer space and more accountable context in which their speech can occur. So it's rampant. Whatever this is rampant. This gender inequity or this diversity and equity office and all the associated groups really do want the place to be safer, and the way for them to make the place safer is to reduce what they call harm, to reduce violence. And what is violence to them? Violence is blah, 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 blah. It's speech. So technically they have to be for free speech, but actually free speech is subsequent to the harm. We ask that the student union adopt a motion that instates a public pro-choice stance on issues of reproductive justice, suspend the funding that Laurier LifeLink receives, prohibit anti-choice events approved by the student union from taking place in public locations on campus, implement a strike policy within the students' union, club, and association policies that will ensure accountability after instances of harm. And then again, if engaging in this discussion has been harmful to you in any way, we encourage you to connect with one or more of the following available resources, namely the Diversity and Equity Office. So there you go. This is another piece of the puzzle. And I'm aware that, I've been kind of text messaging with Lindsay Shepard, and she... I was asking how she's doing, and hopefully she's holding up because she's getting a lot of attention. She still has to get through classes and stuff. So I was checking in, making sure she was doing okay, and she said that she really hopes that people kind of look past her and see that the way that the entire college is acting is actually a much bigger deal than just her instance. Now, what I've been doing is going past the ugliness of the situation and trying to get into the inside baseball of these events, of these institutions. And I know that it's taxing for most people for their attention and for even like, why care? This is a bunch of gobbledygook. Why does this really matter? These people are just idiots. These people are fools. However, that's true, but these people are burrowing themselves deep into our institutions of education, into our institutions of law, and then into our corporation institutions through HR departments and through these diversity workshops and so on and so forth. I hope that I can slowly make a stronger case that this ideology, while it is it's terribly boring on the surface and it doesn't really make sense on the surface, and it's just kind of like baffling and foolish, it has developed for itself a certain set of tactics and basically argumentations that can twist and bend and manipulate people in order to gain more and more control for itself. And the weird thing about it that I still haven't figured out is that it seems to be a cult, but it's a decentralized cult. And a lot of the language pops up very similarly between, faculty, administration, and student unions and stuff. And you can say, well, what if a faculty member is actually writing this? Because it sounds just like a faculty member. Or did somebody from Evergreen go over here and help them draft this essay? Because it has a very, one of the things that I find most insidious about it is the homogeneity of the language and of the patterns of thought. That's what disturbs me most. And that's why my deepest critique of this is that this is not just anti-individuality or anti-free speech. This is anti-creativity. This is anti-individuality. This is anti-uniqueness. This is a movement that wants to create everybody in its own image, and it's operating under the banner of diversity, and it's operating under the banner of harm reduction, when what it's actually doing is decreasing our tolerance to harm and then increasing our inability to fend for ourselves and to not take things so seriously and to guard ourselves from being overly harmed constantly by exposure to things that we don't like. So that's that. That's my little editorial. Have a good one. Bye.
They don't really have a concept of being illuminated or easy to see. She still thinks she's walking around stealthily.